I'm a journalist and a writer, and it is my great pleasure this afternoon to be moderating this session on media in a post-truth era. I have with me three very celebrated and respected guests. So I have Gelare Kiazan, who's a journalist with Vice News. She's also a photographer, not also a photographer, she I think is mainly a photographer, a filmmaker, and a video maker. She has lived, she's of Iranian origin. She has lived in the UAE, in Iran, and the US, am I right, or the UK? Canada, right. We have Alex Haynes, who's a French-British national. He's a barrister based in London, specializing in the internal law of international organizations. Alex also lectures in law at various institutions in England and Hong Kong, and also at the Sorbonne. And Murtaza Salangi is a veteran journalist. He is the former DG Radio Pakistan and former broadcast journalist for the VOA Washington. He is a bureau chief, Capital TV, Islamabad. Our session today is about, as I said, global media in a post-truth era. Now, there are lots of different terms which have arisen in the recent past and which have gained currency with alarming rapidity to my mind, one of which is post-truth, another one is alt-right, yet another one is alternative facts. Today we are concerning ourselves with post-truth. Now, I thought it might be helpful to start with a brief introduction of what I understand post-truth to mean. But before that, I'd like you to cast your mind back to a time not very long ago when, if you were stating some seemingly improbable fact, or if you were going to talk about something which people did not agree on, or which alarmed them or surprised them, and you mentioned this fact to people and they questioned you, if you responded by saying, I read it in a newspaper, or I heard it on the radio, then that was the end of the argument. People assumed that whatever you heard on the radio or whatever you read in the newspaper was true. And therefore, it had a kind of authority which was final. So that ended any argument. There was a mutual consensus between both sides that it was correct and it was true, and therefore you could agree on things. Now, the problem is that when people begin to doubt the veracity of the media, what do you have to rely on? Also, so we have entered what is then a state of post-truth. Now, post-truth is circumstances, it has been defined as such by Adil Najam as circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotional and personal beliefs. So it is less about facts and more about what you want to hear, either because of your emotional makeup or because of your beliefs. And post-truth, according to Mr. Najam again, does not equal fake news or misinformation or lying or exaggeration. It thrives in an overdose of information and lets you choose your own echo chamber of nonsense. I'm not sure that I agree entirely, because I think that post-truth is also equals fake news and misinformation, or lying, as I like to call it. But we'll come to that. First of all, I would like to start by asking all my panelists here that The role of the media in a functioning democracy is not just to purvey information, but also to hold governments to account. That is the role of the media. They are, so to speak, the policemen and policewomen of the executive. Now, in a world where most people are getting their news from Twitter or from Facebook or from other social media sites, can we, A, rely on the veracity of the news, and B, can we rely on them to hold governments to account? I would like to start to put this question, first of all, to Alex Haynes, because I believe Alex has done quite a lot of work on this. So Alex, would you say that social media can be relied upon to hold, do you agree first that it is the duty of the media to hold governments to account? And B, whether other sites which now work in the place of what was traditional media can be relied upon to serve the same purpose?
In many cultures and nations, I think traditionally that was one of the roles of the media, and there's no doubt about that. The problem is when you get to social media platform, whether or not the media still has the same role. And I think, and perhaps this is too much of a traditional view, but to hold government to account, you need some sort of institution. And social media isn't, it's just recycling of news, or several degrees of recycling. You need a journalist with a profile, preferably a public profile that people can read. It doesn't have to be a famous journalist, but someone whose profile is accessible. You need some sort of institution, the name of a paper or the name of an online, it can be, whether I'm using the word traditional, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a printed paper online, but that's the difference between social media. There's some sort of institution that you can look to, you can criticize, and you can actually see who's writing this. If you don't have that, you can't even have a hope in hell to start to hold government to account, because there's no basis to even start criticizing where that's coming from. So yes, I mean, I completely agree with your opening statement in that regards.
Murtaza Sahab, what would you say?
Well, when it comes to the role of media in a society like Pakistan, it doesn't have to just hold the quote-unquote government into account, because people who understand Pakistani society and politics and Pakistani state know for a fact that we don't have one government in Pakistan. We are ruled by different structures of power. Some, and at times weaker in government than more powerful outside government. So the role of media, as I understand, is to challenge the outrageous power of all those powerful lobbies and institutions within the country and even at the regional and international level. So we are ruled by a consortium of forces, some directly in government and many outside government. So I would stretch it a little bit.
So I work with various organizations, I work with various platforms. And one thing is that first, I think that we, as those who are trying to give out the information, have to be responsible for the information we give. That is our sole responsibility. But I think within the various countries that we work, we can't always act the same in trying to either hold the governments accountable or hold the people accountable for either, when we focus on the misuse or what is happening. I think it's I think, joining up with an institution definitely helps. But I think also the media, in today's, at least, society is, trying to raise awareness and, bringing out questions for people so each individual can go out and research and question their own position, where they stand. Because in some places you cannot hold accountable directly the government, and it becomes complicated because then it can also work against you. So I think that we have to be very clear where we are, where we're holding the government accountable, all the people accountable, how we're doing it, the type of messaging that we're doing, and we as individuals being responsible with the way that we're communicating.
I think responsibility then, if you're not working for what Alex says is an institution, then responsibility is vested in the individual. And I was just talking to a blogger earlier on, and I said that, I always worked for institutions because I've been a freelance journalist, but I've given my articles to various newspapers to publish, and I never ever read the comment section after my my articles are published, because a lot of the time it's just drivel and it's nonsense, or some of the time it is just abusive for the sake of being abusive. They wanted to take exception. And he said, no, he always, and so I asked him, I said, when you write your blogs, do you bother to fact check? Because when I write for a newspaper, I'm asked, they keep checking and asking me, is this correct? This figure you've given, is this correct? So I asked him, I said, do you bother to check your facts? And he said, yes, I do, and if I don't, within seconds, somebody will correct it. And if after a while, if I'm known as somebody who's not in possession of his or her facts, then I get sidelined. So it is in my own interest to know what I'm talking about. But just very quickly, Gilari, we were talking about this earlier with regard to Arab Spring. Traditional news media are slower on the uptake than citizens' media,
right,
or citizens' websites or whatever. They see something, they take a photograph, they tweet, and within seconds the news has become viral. So newspapers is much slower altogether, but even television is beginning to feel the pressure exerted now by media, by social media. And so you have this ticker tape running at the bottom of your screens, which is constantly feeding in information. And because they feel the pressure of social media, even traditional news channels like television channels, etc., they will not check the information before they release it. So recently, there was a case in Lahore where, if I'm wrong about my facts, please do correct me, but there was after a series of bombs all over Pakistan, one of which was in Lahore, there was an explosion in Lahore, and it was, I believe it was because of some LPG containers which had burst. I think it began with social media saying there's been another explosion in defense, there's been a bomb explosion, etc. And because the news media thought that if we don't, because of their own internal sense of competition with each other, but also B, because of the competition with social media, they felt that if they don't put out this news, they will have lost. So they put out the news without checking it.
Yeah.
With the result that there was mass hysteria, schools shut down, people rushed home, picked up their children. There was a general sense of confusion, and only a couple of days later it became clear that this wasn't a bomb explosion. So in situations like that, the point that I want to bring out here is that traditional sources of media now feel under pressure because of social media, because of competition amongst and within various television and radio channels, and also because of citizens putting out stuff. They feel beleaguered on two counts, I think. One, because there's this race to give out information. And second, I think, is this, they feel that people now want more than just hard facts. They want emotion. They see that social media is thriving on that. Yeah. The kind of abuse that you see on social media, the drama that you see, the sensation that you feel, and therefore therefore they feel that they have to compete on those grounds. Would you agree with that, or do you think that that is only limited to a very small section of the media, if that? So, Murtaza Saab, can I start with you first?
Well, one of the reasons why social media is more popular and any piece of quote-unquote information spreads too quick on social media is basically a vote of no confidence against the mainstream media. I'm not generalizing, but I can probably focus on Pakistani media because lies and falsehoods wrapped as truth and news pushes out on mainstream media, both print and television, on a daily basis. Because what we call news is basically manufactured and engineered information that suits, protects, and at times hurts the interests of certain sections. Because truth is a dynamic reality. It's not a pond. It's a phenomenon that's happening. It has a direction. It has several facets and dimensions. So when you cut out some of the aspects and wrap it as a piece of news, and lot of news, as a news person myself, heading a bureau with 3 decades of experience in both radio, print, and television, let me admit that most of the news which are news of public importance are not published, not aired on radio and television. So more information is suppressed. An outlet that's supposed to push out facts of public information actually works as a body that suppresses truth. That's the hard reality. So I was saying that it's more of a vote of no confidence. When people know what happens to them in a Pakistani society, which is basically an apartheid society, ruled by oligarchies and mobs, we, the mainstream media, serve to protect the interests of those oligarchies, where the country has been practically torn apart, where a social, economic, and political system is engineered, where the downtrodden, the suppressed, the poor, both urban and rural, they are just supposed to serve those big oligarchies. So that is the heart and soul of this issue. That's why even that information that truly serves the interests of truth and people at large, now that information is also being suppressed and silenced on social media. So even those forces who control, own, operate, and engineer mainstream media have gotten hold of social media, which could support and help the voiceless people.
True. I would say that the lack of trust in traditional sources of media is not confined just to Pakistan. As we saw in Brexit and as we saw in the vote for Trump recently, there is a general disillusionment of people across the board with what they perceive to be interest groups who are ruling them and trying to push them in one direction or the other. Gelare, what would you, I think, you know, in Iran this has happened for a long time as well. News has been almost how shall I say it, the sort of in the possession of the ruling party and of ruling interests. And so people have a disillusionment, general disillusionment, and so they looked for information elsewhere.
I think that if you look at sort of the rise of citizen journalism and kind of when it came about and it sort of took over a lot of the sort of segments in the mainstream or traditional news was actually, you know, we had the Green Movement and we had the Arab Spring and whatnot. I think that, you know, sort of based on what was just said about, you know, people feeling that there's certain information not being told and they feel that they need to share it, and that sort of challenge the sort of the main news institution. Iran, yes, it's a very tricky place for sure. I think there's different ways that people are getting the news. I think that I think most importantly, I really want to stress on the fact that people themselves need to also understand the different departments that they're getting their news from. We can't always expect outlets to tell us how to think, how to be informed. I understand that it is our responsibility to give that information, but it's also the people's responsibility to educate themselves and research on where they're getting their information from. You know, I can't expect from a certain type of newspaper why they're not challenging, I don't know, a certain constitution or a law. You know, I need to also understand where I should get my information from. And, you know, there's going to be some places where you're not going to get all the information, but there's books. You know, there's a lot of well-written books that also, you know, kind of give you a broader perspective. There's feature articles that will also give you that has taken months to write. And I think that, you know, we need to kind of look all around when we want to make our assumptions or sort of our, you know, the way we gather our information. You know, even if you, let's take Iran, for example, you know, you get your headline news, you get the news outlets that report out of the country, you get the inside news, and I think with all of this, you can kind of grasp an idea of what is happening locally. And I think that if you just rely on Twitter, Facebook, you know, any information that's coming at you at a high speed, then you are going to get lost. And I think one needs to step back and analyze sometimes the information they have instead of saying, why am I not getting it?
True. Alex, what do you have to contribute to this, particularly in the light of what we saw with Brexit?
I don't know how publicised the whole Brexit aftermath of the referendum was in Pakistan. But one thing that happened in November of last year, which was remarkable, and I've never seen in my lifetime, and I don't know what the audience will think of this, but the government after the referendum, the British government, interpreted the result of the referendum to mean that they could then just leave the European Union. And there was a question as to whether or not actually Parliament had to vote, as opposed to just the government pushing it through. So there's a big debate about that, and eventually someone brought a case to the High Court, and 3 judges sat down, heard the evidence, and made a ruling that the government didn't have the power to leave the European Union, but Parliament had to vote on it. It's a pretty simple concept for anybody, I think, to grasp. But the day after the judgment, the newspapers in the UK, and I'm not just talking about the sensationalist tabloids, also newspapers like the Telegraph, which traditionally have had their Telegraph is to the right of centre, but it's had a good reputation in the journalist world.
It's a respected paper.
Very respected. And even the Telegraph, they did nothing short of attacking the judges. And that is very, very concerning, because it wasn't about the content of the judgment. It was attacking them, not just putting them up on the front page, enemies of the people, or people versus the judges, or as it was, judges versus the people. But it even went into some of the judges' personal lives. So they attacked one of the judges' sexuality, another judge's his interest in fencing. He was into fencing. I think he won some sort of medal. And the newspapers thought, well, this is something that we can make fun of, and this is something bad for whatever reason. Another judge had made, as a lawyer before becoming a judge, had made a lot of money, that was his practice, in European Union law. I mean, that's exactly why that judge was sitting on that tribunal, because he was an expert in EU law. But because he'd made money from practicing European Union law, the newspapers somehow turned that against him. And that was the first remarkable step, which, as I said, I've never seen an attack against what the British have always been quite proud of, an independent judiciary and a rule of law. But the second aspect, which was even more shocking, I think, was the government's decision to not protect the judiciary, because it suited the government. So the press, for whatever reason, to sell papers, to compete with social media, to go with the 51% majority of the voters, to basically be in the pro-Brexit camp as opposed to the anti-Brexit camp, went one way, attacked the judiciary, attacked the judges, attacked the parties, the actual law firms and the parties that brought the case in the first place. And then the government, instead of setting the record right, not for the content of Brexit, but just making the point, the judiciary is independent, the judges are independent, this is their decision, was very quiet, and that was deliberate. And that was a Conservative government in the UK. It could have been a left-wing government, it doesn't matter. But that was very concerning, because traditionally the press has been a counterbalance to government. And sometimes government has to be a counterbalance to sensationalist press. But in this example, they were both in it together. And that's where,
and what was very scary was that they were both in it together against the judiciary, which is a pillar of democracy. So it's that they were attacking one of their own institutions. That's frightening.
And if that can happen in a country where the judiciary has always been well respected, not all the time, but on average, the judiciary in the United Kingdom's got a good reputation. But to be attacked in that way was so, I think, so terrifying, because what else can happen?
Yes.
So, yeah, that was a very concerning step.
Yeah. But Murtaza Sahab, we were discussing this earlier today, that, I mean, this happens regularly in Pakistan as well, that here the government in Britain was not attacking so much, but not siding with the judges, or not siding with the judgment of the judges, because they felt that their own interests were in the other camp. In Pakistan too, we've seen this time and time again, that you have an instance where, just to keep certain stakeholders quiet, or just to appease them, laws are passed, or judgments are made, or statements are given, which are actually against the interests of the people. So, for instance, this issue we were talking about today, the PTA issue, where they've said that they can, it is obligatory for citizens to go and look for sites where there is blasphemous content. In the long run, this is not good for the people of Pakistan, for the citizens of Pakistan.
Well, the verdicts of our judiciary, or actions of our judiciary, historically speaking, it has been a mixed bag, from Justice Munir to Iftikhar Chaudhry. You know, we have seen absolutely different kind of judgments, pro-people and anti-people, pro-justice and injustice-filled verdicts. So And it reflects our society. It reflects the social classes, the lobbies, the powerful interest groups. And, you know, you call me whatever, but a lot of times those verdicts have supported one or the other group of social classes. As we have some bad judgments, we also have some good and courageous verdicts too. For example, the Supreme Court decision in case of Mumtaz Qadri was a very difficult judgment.
Courageous.
And it needed tons of courage to come up with that decision. So, you know, it's hard for me to say, you know, to put judiciary or their verdicts in one bag. We have to support and praise the good ones. And as citizens, it's our right to criticize the judgments after they are delivered. The trouble is that our judiciary has been heavily politicized, especially during this lawyers' movement of Mr. Iftikhar Chaudhry. And everybody now loves some limelight. Judges who used to speak through their verdicts now speak through their observations run on TV tickers. So the times that are a-changing, we see these things, but these are sad. This is a sad patch in terms of judiciary. It must go to that original phase where good judges used to speak through their verdicts, not through their observations and remarks, published and aired on television screens, and then followed by long sessions of evening talk shows and press conferences by politicians.
Talking of evening talk shows and hosted by news anchors or hosted by media celebrities, it brings me to the subject of infotainment. In Pakistan today, there is the line between information and entertainment has been blurred. It is talk shows now where often very little information is exchanged, very little fact is discussed. It's basically just opinions, and hatreds are vented, and old resentments are aired, and anger is unleashed, and crowds are incited. Those are the kind of things that pass for news programs now. I think it is also true of the rest of the world. We saw that with Trump, and the amount of free airtime he got in the primaries was because people looked upon him as entertainment. They thought that the entertainment value was so high that they should give him time. And you know, he was a useful sort of buffoon. They thought that he was never going to win the election, but this was going to be good for their ratings. Similarly, with Boris Johnson and his antics. And then Boris Johnson's statements, Boris Johnson's particular characteristics, his often excessive kind of rhetoric. This is all seen as perfectly kosher because it is entertaining. It also then leads to a certain, what shall I say, permissiveness, in that they can say and do anything. They can accuse people without providing any evidence for their accusations. They can brand people with the most horrible nicknames. They can, you know, and those things stick. And in this sort of post-truth era, nobody is concerned whether these allegations or whether the a sensationalist kind of statements on television are true or not. People just want to be entertained. It reminds me almost of a sort of a spectacle, like a circus. And I would like to ask Gelarif first, whether this is, you see this as a worldwide trend? Do you see this only as a sort of small blip which will go away eventually, or something which is going to stay?
There's definitely that happening. You're seeing the rise of entertainment come into journalism, or in a way of basically communicating information and facts. And people, the ratings have gone up when it is more entertaining, more sensationalized. One thing, there's always been an interesting argument on it. It's like one point you're getting people to start listening more and start looking into different countries and trying to actually read up on what is happening. So there was that talk that, wait, okay, it could be entertaining, but look, now people are interested in what's happening in, I don't know, Africa, etc., whatnot. People are getting more interested into politics in the US and all these different arguments. I definitely agree that it has a negative outcome, or it could have a negative outcome, because we might ignore what the facts are beneath it and sort of rely on our emotions and sort of as a let's get together and see what's happening kind of, sort of time spending. But one thing that could happen, and I've seen certain outlets now do this, is they started with this sort of entertainment, they started with this sensation, and now they're trying to kind of focus on more of the facts. So it's like the next story they come out, it's much more focused on, okay, let's get more depth into that, let's get more information, let's bring in more characters and sort of people and try to slowly add the information layers to it.
Now, under cover of entertainment.
Yeah, like they start bringing it in more because they have the attention now.
Yes, yes.
So now, okay, now that I have the attention, let me now get deeper and let me give in more depth into the subject that we're covering. I just hope that, that people start also wanting to have more information. They start demanding for more facts, and they start asking questions that, okay, he said that, but wait, I want more proof.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the worrying trends, and I don't know when this started, but it's when governments or political parties realized that, and it's a little bit what you were saying just there, they don't care whether people believe them or not. So we've seen it with Trump, it's a very good example, but also in the UK. You mentioned Boris Johnson. This whole thing about if we leave the EU, we can save lots of money for the National Health Service. So
350 million pounds a week, yeah.
And as we were discussing this before, that figure was printed on a bus. If we leave the EU, we will save £350 million, which can go on our health service. The day after Brexit, at least 2 politicians came out and said, well, that was never true in any event.
2 politicians who were Brexiteers.
Yes.
Who were campaigning to leave, yeah.
Conceded that it wasn't true. They didn't say we lied, but they put a spin on it, as they always do. But it was conceded that this wasn't true. It wasn't based on anything.
They didn't say it was a political statement, did they?
Yes, there was that too. The 35 punctures, yes, was a political statement.
And just before everybody else who didn't vote for Brexit was cheering and saying, "Ha, we told you it wasn't true," well then they realised that nobody actually cared. People, whether or not they were proved wrong, they were still happy that they voted because they voted for something beyond that. And it's when the politicians jump on the bandwagon of fake news or whatever it is, that's irresponsible. I mean, everybody's got a duty or a role in society, a role to play, but the politician's role is even, there's a higher threshold. And linked to that, the number of racist or racially aggravated attacks or assaults in the UK after Brexit rose. And again, the government was very quiet about that. The statistics are published on police statistics and all of that, but the government was very, very quiet because it helped its position to not make noise about that, because it didn't want to associate people who voted for Brexit with these racially aggravated attacks. And even more concerning, the racially aggravated attacks weren't even necessarily on European Union members. They were just racially aggravated attacks against anybody who wasn't British and who wasn't white. I mean, lots of non-white British were also attacked. Now, I don't want to...
Muslims, I think, more than anybody else.
And that's got nothing to do with the EU at all. Nobody can even pretend it does. It was a completely separate issue. But again, the government didn't step in to raise this awareness, and most of the press didn't step in to raise awareness as well, because it was self-serving and it assisted them to keep quiet. Now, I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, the rise in attacks was only very slight, but the percentage speaks for itself.
Yeah. Murtaza Sahab, the 35 punctures and the accusations without basis. We were talking about this just now, about the fact that you don't even have to have. The public doesn't care whether you have facts or not at your disposal, or whether you back up your accusations. And the line between entertainment and information is such that people rather have entertainment than information.
I think the public does care.
They do care.
I think people eat the food that we serve them. People have to eat, and whatever we give them, they will eat. So I don't believe in this, dictum that, oh, people are asking for trash, so that's why we serve them. I think the role of media is not of a follower, but a leader. There's a heavy responsibility on journalists and media to serve public interest. It's not a ghee factory. It's not a towel-making shop.
It's not actually, should not really be in the service of making financial profit also.
Exactly, but sadly enough, I don't want to say more about the outside world. I want to focus on Pakistan. And I have been saying it for a long time, that we in Pakistan are sandwiched between state media and SOT media. There is no public interest media. That's what we need. That's what we don't have. And this is what I don't know how to create the economy or the financial model where we can truly serve the interests of public, because it's not being served. So we, the people, have to think about it. How do we do it? But I can tell you what, whatever is being aired, as you were talking about talk shows and chat shows. I mean, people have not forgotten about that leaked video of a talk show where a real estate tycoon was sitting with two of our high-profile anchors, and they were actually managing how to tell lies to the people. It's not an old memory, not a decade-old long thing, but that happens every day in the newsrooms and, talk shows every day, because there is no editor, professional editor in news or current affairs programs. It's the SOT who wears all those hats of the editor, who dictates with the help of certain anchors who also have their own vested interests, how to obfuscate, how to suppress the facts, how to varnish, polish, refabricate, engineer, quote-unquote information that's to be fed to the people, which only serves the interests of power groups. That's the sad reality of Pakistani media.
Thank you. I'm afraid because the last session overran significantly, we will have to wrap up very soon on this session. I have some questions here. I think I have another 5 minutes, so we'll just go through these questions very quickly. There's a question about how the state indoctrination by the media is not a new concept. that we know. It has existed since the media was empowered, and in many cases that is the sole purpose of the media. The mainstream media has rarely ever been the place to get facts because the media conveys what corporate interests benefit from. I think you just answered that question, but
I agree.
do you agree, Gilare? Is that that you really, media is not the place you go to for facts because the media conveys what corporate interests benefit from?
I think we need to first understand what we exactly define as media, like what are we speaking about specifically? I think that we shouldn't undermine some of the amazing reporters out there. I think there's some great journalists, there's been some great writers and reporters who've dedicated their whole life on this, who've written and given us awareness. I think we shouldn't just look at media as one big thing, but we should start defining it for ourselves, what exactly it is, because there's so many layers to it. And I think that we should start, let's not look at the BBC, but let's look at the reporters. Let's look at the New Yorker has amazing reporters that have been reporting for years, for decades. And I think we shouldn't undermine those people.
And I will have to say here that reporters are not killed for anything, They get killed because they're getting to the heart of a story. They are killed because they're threatening people's vested interests. They're killed because somebody somewhere is going to suffer if this story comes out. And reporters in Pakistan in particular often know the risks, and yet they pursue those stories. And they pursue those stories at the risk of their lives. And many very fine journalists in Balochistan in particular, have given their lives in the interest of serving public interest. And I think that is something that has to be borne in mind, as you're very right in saying that when we talk about the media, we should not forget the sacrifices made by individuals who see this as a sacred duty.
And people have a duty. You can choose what you read. This is what you were saying.
Yes.
If you do your homework, in the UK, for example, Rupert Murdoch, everybody knew he was behind a number of newspapers. People, as long as there is some transparency and people know, well, people can do what they want. They can get all their news from Facebook if they want. But what's the real concern is when we don't really know, when there's no choice. But if there's a choice and people are able to choose, then you can choose journalists who've got a good reputation and who've been doing it for years and who tend to get to the bottom of the most interesting and important stories. So that's also very important. That we can criticize some of this media, as much as we want, but it's the people who pay for it or just read it. Their numbers, they're the people who keep them going. So it also comes down to choice.
Yes.
And transparency is very important with that.
Yes. So the choice, the duty is not just in a democracy, the duty is not just of the media, it is also of the people who consume that media. They have to be more aware and more alert and more demanding, I think. On that note, I'm sorry I can't go through other questions. I'm going to give them to my panelists so that and I'm sure that we will be around for the next 5 minutes or so, but we just have to leave the stage. So I'd like to thank you all. Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and your attention.